Welcome to the Phoenix Conversations, second chances, fresh starts, and powerful new chapters. I'm Lucy Macara, author and entrepreneur, and each week I talk to men and women who've lived through turning points and come out brighter on the other side. People who've rebuilt careers, relationships, their health, their hope, and their lives. So, if you're standing on the edge of change or just need proof that it's never too late to start again, subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations. Today, I'm talking to David Horne, the founder of Add Then Multiply, a consultancy that guides entrepreneurs on a journey of exponential growth. In addition to raising over £100 million, he's bought or sold around 24 companies. David is the author of the award-winning book, also called Add Then Multiply, How Small Businesses Can Think Like Big Businesses and Achieve Exponential Growth. David is also the founder of Funding Focus, a social enterprise whose mission is to level the uneven playing field that female and underrepresented entrepreneurs face when raising capital. They run events and are tapping into a global audience of underrepresented entrepreneurs, basically entrepreneurs who aren't white men. David says there are two very different playing fields when it comes to raising funding to grow your business, one for white men and another one for everyone else. And he is here to level the playing field. He's given a TED Talk, and his second book is Funded Female Founders, How to Traverse the Uneven Playing Field and Secure Funding to Grow Your Business. But David started his career training as a chartered accountant with PwC, and he has had a few reinventions along the way. Hello and welcome, David Horne. Thank you for joining me on the Phoenix Conversations. Lovely to have you here.
Thank you, Lucy. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Let's start at the beginning, David. So I know you didn't grow up in the UK, although that's where you live now. So tell me about where and how you grew up, and what kind of child was young David?
So I was born in Vancouver in Canada, and when I was 2 years old, we moved to Vancouver Island, to a city called Victoria, that's the capital city of the province of British Columbia, a medium-sized city. I think back then it was 250,000 people, now probably 500,000. But I always just say I'm from Vancouver because everybody knows where it is. But yeah, so born and raised there. I was the youngest of 4 kids. So my older siblings are 4, 8, and 10 years older than me. So quite a big age gap. And certainly for the older two, it was like, they were grown up teenagers when I was just a little kid. So they tell me I was the typical annoying last child, and I say I was delightful. It was interesting though, before my mum passed away, we sat down with her and we asked her to describe each of her children at the age of 10 in 3 words. And her 3 words for me were inquisitive, precocious, and quick.
That's lovely. What a lovely thing to do, and what three brilliant words to choose for you. So do you think those words still apply to you?
Yes, I think I've become a little less precocious in my old age. And in fact, my wife says definitely.
She should know.
So yeah, they must. She would know. Yeah.
So what was your what was your outlook on the world when you were young?
I mean, when I was 12, my parents brought me and my sister, who's 4 years older, to Europe on a family holiday. And we had 6 weeks, and we were in the UK, France, Germany, Switzerland, and Holland. And I remember being fascinated by the fact that everything was different. The cars were different. The architecture was different. The food was different. The way people dressed was different. And I remember just thinking, wow, this is so incredible. But I was also frustrated because apart from when we were in the UK, I couldn't communicate. And we went back to Canada, and I went into high school at this point. And in Canada, in high school, you start learning French if you're in the English-speaking part. And so I went in and started doing French, and all my friends were going kind of like, oh, French. Blah, blah. And I'm like, no, but I've been to Paris and the Eiffel Tower and the Louvre. And so I was really excited and really enthused by all of that. And then in my next year of high school, I had the opportunity to pick up another language. And my choice was between German and Spanish. And I'd never been to Spain, but I'd been all over Germany. And so I thought, I'm going to learn German. And as fate would have it, my German teacher was one of those teachers that I will remember for the rest of my life. She was tough as nails. I'm convinced she was Austrian, but I'm convinced she was descended from Prussian colonels. She was just tough as nails. But boy, did I learn. And it was really interesting. And we came back on a family holiday when I was 15, because my sister that was 4 years older had come back to Europe, got married, and was living in Holland. So our whole family came out with the older two, the 8 and 10-year-old older ones. And I did a trip around Europe with the two of them. And I was the one who was doing all of the communicating in French and German because their language skills weren't very good. And I was really interested. And I remember deciding at the age of 15 that I wanted to live in Europe one day.
Oh, so do you think that whole kind of combination of experiences almost kind of was your first reinvention in a way from,
Yes,
a Canadian, a kind of singular culture child to somebody
very
who
much
really
so.
wanted to go further?
Very much so. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And when I embarked upon my career, it was a definite thing. I didn't know back then what a life goal was, but that was my first life goal that I set myself. And then, again, as luck would have it, fate, the universe, whatever you want to call it. I ended up doing German at university. I did economics and German at university. When I went in to sign up with the German department, and I spoke to the head of the German department, he said, was Hedda Thatcher your teacher? And I said, yes. He said, you can come straight into our third year level courses. You don't need to do any of the introductory stuff. If she's taught you, come straight in. So that was really cool. And then I guess another mini reinvention. At that stage, I thought my career was going to be in banking. And I had worked for the Royal Bank of Canada while I was in the summers while I was at university. And in my last year, I got a call from the branch manager where I'd worked for 2 years, 2 summers. And he called me in and he said, look, Canada's in a deep recession right now. The bank have frozen the management recruitment program. I can't offer you a position in that. I'll give you a job as a bank teller. And then he looked at me and he said, but David, you didn't go to university to be a bank teller, did you? And I kind of went, wow. And so I went up to the campus recruitment office and found out that the accounting firms were doing their annual milk rounds in about 3 weeks' time. And I had a couple of friends whose dads were chartered accountants, and I went and chatted with both of them and thought, okay, this is something that's worth going for. And back then it was the big 8. It's now the big 4, but back then it was the big 8. And I got interviews with 7 of them, and I got a job offer with Price Waterhouse, which is one of the, now PwC, which is one of the like most elite ones in the world. And back then I didn't really know what they all were, except I knew Price Waterhouse were the people who did the voting at the Oscars.
That's
And
right, of
so
course.
I got that role. Interestingly, I found out 6 months after I joined that the reason why they picked me out of however many hundred other candidates there were was because of my language skills. Because unknown to me, Price Waterhouse in Europe had just bought a huge accounting firm that was in Germany, Austria, and Switzerland. And they were desperate for Anglo-Saxon qualified accountants who spoke German.
Oh, what a piece of, well, kind of behind the scenes fate, if you like, that you had, got that
Absolutely.
absolute kind of interest and love of other cultures from your youthful trip to Europe, taken that
Yes.
through, got that amazing
Yes.
teacher, and then
Yes.
been offered this job that was because of that. So extraordinary.
Yeah. Yeah,
So did you
absolutely.
then
No, it
go
was
to Germany?
we went to Switzerland, in fact, but I had another Phoenix moment before that. So in 1985, sat my accounting final exams for the first time. And I say for the first time because I didn't pass them. That is the first and only exam I have ever failed in my life. And it was a really, really brutal experience for me to go through. Having never had, I guess, being precocious and quick and all that, I was good at exams. And I remember being shocked, and I remember my wife and I had booked to go away and stay at the place where we had gone for our wedding night, because I thought, oh, won't that be lovely, and we'll celebrate and it'll be wonderful. And I remember walking up and down the beach and just thinking, oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get through this? And I just knuckled down and revised hard and worked hard for another year and passed the exams a year later. And you just, you've, it's like, I wanted it so badly and I was willing to put in the effort, and it was hard, but I was willing to acknowledge that it was my fault that I failed the exam. I hadn't approached it in the right way.
In the sense that you hadn't worked hard enough, or you'd I don't know, got the wrong attitude or learnt the wrong
The
content?
the wrong attitude, and what I subsequently learned, I mean, I ended up paying to get, some special tutoring and worked with some people who were exam markers, and, gave you the real insight. And I had answered the questions. So it was almost like I had answered verbatim the question that they asked, but I hadn't thought, what's the question behind the question? And this is the exam that once you pass it, you are a chartered accountant and you can offer your services to the public. You can open an accounting firm. I chose not to stay in the profession in a firm and went into industry. Yeah, that it gives you that right. So they really, really work you hard. And only about 50% of the people who sit the exam pass it.
Yes, so
So that was
it's not a given that however good you are, it's not a given that you pass. But I totally understand how, for somebody who's found school and academia and probably university comparatively easy and not failed anything, that moment when it really is a blow, and it does really require you to reinvent yourself in terms of assessing yourself, how you view
Yes.
yourself, and how you're going to take your life forward after that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you have to dig deep. You have to dig deep. And it probably took me a month to just kind of get over the shock and the oh my God, what have I done and all of that. And then just, right, okay, it's down to me to pick myself up and fix this, because I have this goal that I want and I have this opportunity to achieve this goal, but I need to pass this exam to get there. Later, I sat the exam in September of 86, and you get the results in December. And then I had 6 more months of practice experience before I got the formal qualifications. But during that time, I reached out to the HR people and said, I'm still interested in moving to a German-speaking office. And it all went quiet for a while. And then one day I walked into the office in early 1987, and bearing in mind, it was 1987, so a long time ago. And there was a telex. For the younger listeners, they won't know what that is. It's even older technology than a fax. But there was a telex from Pricewaterhouse in Zurich offering me a job. And so in the summer of 1987, my wife and I, we'd been married 4 years at that stage. We sold off what few possessions we had. We packed our clothes into 4 suitcases, got on board an airplane with one-way tickets and a 2-year employment contract, and that was 38 years ago.
So what was it like? I mean, I would say that moving to a new culture like that, to a new country, is also a reinvention process as well. Would you agree with that? Did you feel that was kind of like a new phase for you?
It was more of a reinvention for my wife than it was for me, because I was in work. I was working for the same company in a different location. Obviously, new culture, new language, all of that. But my wife had a residence permit. She wasn't allowed to work. She's a teacher. The literal translation of my wife's residence permit said, "is permitted to remain with husband." Yeah. That wonderful Germanic culture, there are rules and you will follow them, and she is permitted to remain with me. Now, that meant she wasn't allowed to work. We moved, we got a lovely flat. I went to work. I had an instant community. She didn't know anybody. She'd never been to Switzerland before. She'd done a year German at university, so had a very basic knowledge of it, but didn't really understand it. She came from a very tight, close-knit family. So she was the youngest of 3, but they're only 2.5 years apart. So very different from my family. And the first year for her was very, very difficult. And then she came across an international school where she was able to volunteer, and that opened everything up for her. And
That's
then
good to
I
hear.
ended up getting an incredible job offer to join my biggest client. So I was 2 years with Pricewaterhouse in Zurich, and then one day my biggest client approached me, and I became the number 2 finance guy for the Swiss subsidiary of a big American technology company. So I was the number 2 finance guy. I'm 27 years old, number 2 finance guy in a company with $500 million in turnover. I was in the right place at the right time.
So how long did that role last? What happened then, David?
That role lasted 4 years, and I mean, my wife Kate agreed to stay if we could have a family. So we had two kids. So both of our daughters were born in Zurich, which is also, I mean, it's not a phoenix moment in terms of rising from the death, but it's a very life changing
Absolutely.
thing, as you know. So yeah, so we had two young children, and after a few years, Kate said, you know, if we're going to stay, I want to go live in an English speaking country. She's originally from the UK, has family here, her mum's here, and so we arranged with the company I was with to move to London, and we moved to London in the spring of '93, and we've been here ever since. And my dad was born here, so I have dual citizenship as well. So.
So you continued to be in the financial world for some time, but then I know there was a change later. What happened next?
So after Price Waterhouse, I spent in total 20 years with bigger companies. I mean, some really big blue chip companies, AT&T, the BBC, Interpublic Group, you know, so big corporates. And then I spent 8 years as the chief financial officer of two companies listed on AIM, which is the alternative investment market on the London Stock Exchange. It's sort of the junior market. And at the end of the 8 years, so this would have been 2010, just after the global financial crash, just before the global financial crash, we did a large acquisition of another company. We ended up being in 23 countries around the world. It was a huge project to pull together. We raised 28 million pounds on the stock exchange to buy this company, and then a global integration and tearing costs out and all that. And we came back to the market in the autumn of 2000 and said, we've done everything that we said we were going to do. Everything's looking good. Happy days. All the market news is in line. And a week later, Lehman Brothers went bust. And 6 months and 4 profit warnings later, the chief exec got fired. It wasn't his fault, but somebody had to go. I threw my hat in the ring, but the board decided to go with an outsider. And he and I were like chalk and cheese from day one. And I stuck around for a year, and I just came to the realization that, you know, if there was ever a boardroom fight, I was going to lose. So I rang up the chairman and we sat down and had a grown-up conversation, and I left. And during this time, I had thought, okay, I'm going to launch my own business. What do I want to do? And I spent a lot of time thinking and talking to friends and family. And it boiled down to my two passions were music and wine. And my then teenage daughter said, Dad, you're too old for the music industry, but wine would be perfect. So I launched a wine business.
Wow,
And I
that is a
thought,
big reinvention from somebody who's been in the corporate world in you know, big corporate structures.
was
Right. So you had a lot of skills built up, and yet you felt that starting your own business would be the thing.
in all honesty, Lucy, I was burned out. I mean, when the crash happened and the new guy came in, and you know, imagine going to the office and hating your boss every single day. It's just soul destroying. And I just got to the point where I just thought, you know, I remember years ago doing some kind of a development course, and one of the things that the guy said was, every now and then you've got to ask yourself, is my job worth dying for? And the answer's never been yes. And so I just thought, right, that's enough. I've had enough. I'm just going to move on and do something different. And I thought, I'm going to do something totally different. I've always wanted to have my own business, so let's give it a go. So, you know, in terms of advice for the listeners, if you're going to do that, great, but do it in an area that you're known. Do it in an area that you know about. I went to night school and got my wine trade qualifications, so I know about wine, and it's been a hobby for years, but I didn't know anything about the wine industry. I wasn't known in the wine industry. I had a little black book of people in the city who made lots of money, and I thought, they'll buy wine from me. And they didn't.
So 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 ho were you running this business out of your home? Were you so you were sitting at home with a lot of wine somewhere, and trying.
And in fact, what happened within about 3 months, I realized just how brutally competitive the wine industry is and how not very loyal retail customers can be. And I remember going to friends that I knew loved wine and, you know, saying, oh, well, I found this wine and it's really good and da, da, da. And, you know, I can get it for you and it's 25 pounds a bottle. And they come back and say, well, I found it online for $23.99. So I'm going to buy it over there. And in all honesty, Lucy, I went into a period of very deep denial. It's all going to be fine. It'll all work out. I'll just keep going to wine. I could go to a trade wine tasting event in London every single day. Now, you don't normally drink the wine, you swirl it around and spit it out. But when you're in denial, you get pissed every day. Drinking, I was drinking, I was smoking a lot of marijuana because I just couldn't face the reality of what I'd done. And it was the summer of 2012, just after my 50th birthday. My parents had been here to visit us for my birthday. And I remember my dad being really, really concerned. And, we had a lot of long conversations and stuff. And then my parents went back to Canada. And 3 weeks later, my dad had an accident, fell down a flight of stairs and broke his neck. And he never recovered from that. So I went out and they were able to keep him alive on the machines until I got there. But we all agreed that, there was no brainstem activity. And the last thing Dad would have wanted was to have been kept alive on machines. So we told the nurses in the ICU to, as a family, we took time and all that, but we said, yeah, take the machine, unplug the machines. And so watching my dad die was both an incredibly sad thing and, for me personally, a moment of spiritual awakening. And I realized that there is more to us than just what we see. And there is more to life and this world than what's in the three dimensions. And it's not religion for me. I'm not religious at all. I respect people who have religion, but I don't. But I very much believe that we are part of something that is so much bigger that it's just inconceivable. And that was also the kick up the bum I needed to get my life back on track. And so I started doing finance consulting work, CFO gun for hire kind of thing. In all honesty, I'd lost my mojo and I was playing very small. I was working with brand new startups who didn't have any money and wanted to do stuff. And I'd go in and we'd try and raise some money. And sometimes we'd get some and then I'd get paid. And if we didn't, I didn't, and all that. So that went on for a few years. and then in 2015, I came across Daniel Priestley in the Key Person of Influence program. And I signed up to that program. And that's when you and I first met, because you were the publish mentor. And I went through the KPI program. And as you also know, Daniel and I connected and he was very interested in learning more about what I did. And about 3 weeks after the KPI program finished, Daniel rang me up and I've been the CFO of all of his companies for the last 10 years. So that was another rebirth.
That's a series of reinventions, really, isn't it? From being the big corporate financier to being and the very successful person to being a failed business owner. I mean, that's a
Yes.
pretty devastating reinvention to have to come to terms with. And then, but
Yes.
you obviously you have such resilience because it comes through time and time again in this story that you're telling, that you eventually decide, no, you are going to move on to the next phase. And I think when you open yourself up to that kind of possibility, then the universe, fate, whatever anybody wants to call it, comes in with the opportunity, and that's clearly what
Absolutely.
happened.
Absolutely. Yeah. And so now today in my business, we're a team of 10 people. Dent and all of Daniel's companies are one of our kind of core clients. So right now we've got kind of 4 main client groupings and we're growing and we've got a lot of ambition. And then of course the other thing, which as you know, and again came as a direct result of my first book, Add Then Multiply. I started getting invited to speak at events, and I was speaking at an event for fundraising, and a woman came up and asked me why so little funding goes to female founders, and I said, I have no idea, but I'll find out. And I was shocked by what I found out, and you and I have done a number of things on that, led to my second book being published. And it's really interesting today because actually of those 4 main client groups, Daniel's is the only one that doesn't have a female co-founder in the core bit, although within those companies, as you know, several of them do. But the core kind of KPI program is 3 blokes.
That is
But yeah,
interesting, isn't it?
so
Yes.
it is. And so now I actively, when I'm looking for potential new clients, I'm actively looking for businesses with female founders. And, one of the you and I together, were together at the Great British Entrepreneur Awards, and we won the award for Book Magic. And you very kindly let me keep the gong because you've got enough of them. So thank you for that. But actually, a month later, as you know, the award that I'm actually most proud of was from the Women's Business Club, that gave me the award as the Man of the Year for 2025. And
That is really
that was a
something.
real honor.
That is absolutely brilliant, and congratulations on that. And
Thank
yes,
you.
I mean, we've worked together on a recent acquisition of Rethink Press, and we worked together
Yeah.
on Book Magic AI, and that is brilliant. So one of my contentions is that becoming an author, published author, is in itself a reinvention, because you present a different persona, if you like, to the world. You are suddenly an expert in your field. I mean, not that you weren't an expert before, but you are a sort of, it's clear that, the book goes out and speaks for you and makes you the expert. You join the author club, and it reinvents you in a sort of slightly different way. Do you think?
Unquestionably, Lucy, unquestionably, it adds an instant layer of credibility, and it allows you to connect with people that you might not have otherwise thought you could. I remember shortly after the first book was published, I was on a flight to Switzerland, and I was sat next to a woman who was very focused, and she was obviously an investment banker. I subsequently learned that she worked for one of the big investment firms, Schroders. And we hardly chatted at all because she was really focused on what she was doing. And then we landed, and you're standing around waiting to get off the plane. And I just started to chat with her, and I gave her a copy of my book. And then it was like, oh my gosh. And that totally opened it up. And then she invited me to have coffee at the Schroders offices and things like that. I sent a signed copy of my book to one of my heroes, Warren Buffett, and asked if I could interview him. I didn't get an interview with him, but I did get a lovely, lovely message back from his secretary, who thanked me, who said, Mr. Buffett doesn't give interviews, but he's received your book and he thanks you and he wishes you all the best. Without the book, nothing would have, none of that would have happened. None of that would have happened. And
That
when
is
I look
literally what I call book magic. I mean, I've been calling it book magic. It's those unexpected, extraordinary things that happen to you when you have a published book that you can't predict, but change
yes,
everything sometimes.
absolutely.
So is there a new book coming out, David?
Yes, there is. I'm just really busy right now with client work. I'm actually in the middle of bringing some more people into the team. I said we're a team of 10. Two of them haven't yet officially joined, but we're in conversations so that I can bring them in and free up my time, because there absolutely is another book. It's all in here. And then I'll go into when I have the time, I'll go into Book Magic and write it. And we'll get it published, and that'll be out there again. Yes, absolutely.
I think it's very interesting that your probably key reinventions have come from failure, unexpected failure, that have really ended up making you dive deep and come up again and change your life, essentially.
Yes.
So, David,
Yes.
what advice do you have? Because I'm sure there are always people out there who are facing some kind of change, whether it's desired or being forced upon them. And it's very uncomfortable often. Even when you choose change, it can be uncomfortable. So what's a key piece of advice that you would give to someone in that position?
As scary as it is, just do it and work through it and learn from it. Communicate with members of your family when things are going tough, which I didn't do. I went into this shell, this denial, this drug and alcohol. As Brené Brown says, you can't numb selectively. When you numb everything. And there was this 18-month period where I was numb. And it was horrible, but I got through it. But like now, whenever I'm faced with a difficult challenge, I talk to my family, I talk to my wife, I talk to my daughters. They're all teachers, so they're not business people, but they've got great brains and they love me and they have my best interests at heart. So I've learned that they're a wonderful resource to talk to. Find other peer groups that you can connect with. Daniel's whole KPI community is full of wonderful people that, you can just reach out and say, hey, I'm struggling with something. So find a network that you can get support with. Don't try and do it all yourself. That was probably my biggest mistake, is I thought I can do it all myself.
That's brilliant. That is such good advice, David. David Horne, thank you so much for having this Phoenix conversation. I have found it absolutely fascinating, and thank you for sharing so honestly and openly. It's been a real inspiration. Thanks, David.
Thank you, Lucy. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks, David, for this very honest and open conversation about your periods of reinvention, showing us how the most painful failures and the darkest times are usually the very things that lead eventually to extraordinary new beginnings. Because we all have moments when life knocks us down, but like the phoenix, we also have the power to rise from the ashes. So, if you're standing on the edge of change or just need proof that it's never too late to start again, listen to David's excellent advice and subscribe now to the Phoenix Conversations on Spotify, Apple, or YouTube, or maybe all three. You can connect with me on LinkedIn, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook. Due to my unspellable and unpronounceable name, I am the only Lucy Macara on the internet, and I'd love to hear your reinvention story. I look forward to seeing you on the next episode.